Hello,
Yeah.
everybody.
Hi.
So, we're doing something slightly different for our kitchen table conversations this month. We haven't invited anybody to join us because, Ruth, you and I want to have this conversation with you and me.
Yes.
Because today we're going to talk about something that's slightly more sensitive and slightly more raw, I think. Is that the way to describe it?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's quite personal, isn't it? And I was thinking about this morning before we jumped on the call, and I thought, you and I have known each other 15 years.
Yeah, maybe a bit more now.
And I remember the time when I know I opened up more to you.
Mm,
And so whether it's raw or whether it's a sensitive.
mm,
But I think this conversation all comes down to, yeah, it's maybe having that real safe space, which is when we talked about doing this, and having that safety and having that trusted environment that we both felt that we'd got to a point where we wanted to talk about this, but probably not with an audience and having to think about other people in the room. So it needed to be in the right environment for us to do this. So I think that's why we
I
came up
think
with it, or just be me and you for a bit of a
I
chat
yeah, I think that's absolutely.
and see how it goes.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not because it's raw, it's because it's personal
Yeah.
and because it's between two friends and two colleagues who
Yeah.
talk and share stuff. So, what we're going to talk about today, folks, is we're actually going to talk about the role of trauma and the impact it has on our professional lives. And we're going to talk about trauma broadly. We're not necessarily going to talk about specific traumas, but we're going to talk about the role that that has. And as professionals and as senior professionals, Ruth and I individually, but also how we recognize behaviors in leaders and how we can see where where the trauma influence presents in businesses, and how do we support teams, how do we support individuals off the back of it. So we're going to have our usual kitchen table conversations discussion. It's going to probably, we might, particularly me, I might use the wrong words because I do get in a muddle. Ruth might
You,
go,
you and me both.
the doorbell might go, the dog might come, we're both going to drink our tea, we've both made ourselves a big drink, live inside the Ruth's mug.
I know that is full caffeine.
So, Ruth, let's start. What do we mean by trauma? That a good place to start.
It sounds so um serious, doesn't it? And it sounds um I think when you talk about trauma in life, most people will probably go to worst case scenarios. Um And the reality is that trauma, the same as grief, is very personal to everybody, and everybody goes on a very different journey, and everybody has been impacted it by in different ways.
Mm.
Um, in my mind, what I see is, and it's quite a big word. That sounds silly, doesn't it? It's a big word because it's a small word, but and I think it can scare people of what it means, but for me, it's something that's had probably a negative impact in your life
Yeah.
that has then gone on to impact how you are within not just the workplace, but in adult relationships. So simple terms for me in child trauma, and I go to child trauma because I 100% believe that there's a lot that's happened within as we're becoming adults that we experience that takes us into our professional and our adult life.
Mm.
And it can be anything from friendship groups
Mm.
at school, and how we've built relationships,
Mm.
um, the communities that we grew up in. Um, the differences that people may have felt, broken homes, death. Maybe a way is it's like misaligned when you don't feel that you fit in. There's
I'm going to
big
sneeze.
trauma. There's big traumas.
Yeah.
We know the big traumas, and that I think for this conversation, so we're not going to tackle anything like that. This is about things that happen to people that do cause trauma.
Yeah.
And using that word sort of elevates it into a different place sometimes. And you and I don't have what you and I have been researching this and trying to understand this more and more. We're nowhere near that point at the moment. But
Mm.
I think we got to the point where we said, well, the conversation wasn't it? I think we should be talking about this because we were coaching people and we were recognizing it in the people we were coaching.
Mm.
Then we were brave enough to say we can recognize certain things in ourselves. But how do we have this conversation? Because we don't want it to be something that defines people, but we do feel that it needs to be discussed because we can see it. And I'm going to speak from personal experience of I can see where it has defined my actions because I've not been able to move forward. And I felt trapped because I can't make sense of it, articulate it, understand it. And then definitely I then can't move forward. And then you're in this cycle
Mm.
of doing things and that cycle just becomes bigger and bigger as you become an adult and you don't know what's caused it. And then then you don't know how to fix it.
And I think the word trauma, I agree with you. We always default to the worst case. I was trying to think, for me, what does trauma mean? And I suppose the only way I could, not the only way, but a way I feel I could articulate it is it's something that's caused a reaction,
Yes.
a physical reaction, an emotional reaction. And it's one that people can still feel that feeling.
Yeah.
So exactly as you said, the kid being nasty to you in the playground, and you can still feel
Mm.
that shame that you felt, or that embarrassment, or that hurt. And that can be on different levels of and and just to reiterate, we are not talking about this as therapists today. We
No.
are talking about this as professionals who are coaches who recognize when we're working with leaders and with people professionally where we can see reoccurring behaviours.
Mm-hmm.
That's this discussion. And it's just, we have the ability to bring this to the table and to talk about and to say, right, let's literally sit and talk about this and say, right, how do you feel about that? How do you feel? What do we recognise? So I think with when you're saying for you, you see where it's blockers and where it acts as a barrier. For me, mine is more again from a trauma. It's not necessarily that, it's just reoccurring themes. And when those reoccurring themes come, I then recognize reoccurring behaviors in me as an adult that I do. You and Ruth and I, well, we've become great friends, really great friends over the years, to the point of the closeness to say, and you to say to me, I can see where you are today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything all right? And it's just and maybe this is the bit I'd like to talk about is when we see that, and you see that in me, and you know me, I don't want to talk about the emotions. I don't want to talk about, so I hide between tasks. One task to another task to another task to another task to another task, because I think that's a way of just getting on with it. But how do we manage it when we see it in our friends and in our colleagues?
Mm.
because you don't necessarily want to sit and talk about something major or minor.
Mm,
And I do a lot of work with trauma for youngsters and the impact that has on careers, on confidence, not therapy, coaching, and specifically coaching around careers, which mainly means engaging in education for young traumatized children. Professionally, it's this big thing because we're just
mm,
expected to get on with it.
mm.
So what do we do with it? How can we support colleagues? Or should we talk about how do we, when we recognise it in ourselves, what do we do? Because there's two bits there, aren't there?
I think it's probably it's too big. So I know we keep saying this, but it's too big. And there is there is the final piece of you and I will recommend to people that when there's big trauma, there is therapists that we would, professional psychologists that we would recommend. So if we go to big picture,
Mm.
and there is always that part if you're dealing with colleagues, but it's how to have that conversation. So I think it's the same. It's so big, isn't it? I think it would be good to probably bring it to life a little bit for everybody to just understand a couple of key things that where we think where we see it in ourselves, and maybe in others, and then what we found that has worked as just some guidance.
Mm.
That's what I think.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming. Yeah, okay. So it simply comes down to me. The first thing is being able to have a difficult conversation. Um, and it's very interesting. We both run our own businesses. And I will certainly say that when I ran a team for another organization, I found it easier to have difficult conversations because probably there's a very structured framework there. Still have framework within my business. But the biggest thing was moving from working for somebody else and running teams for another organization and having my own business. It was far more emotional. And I didn't expect that. Um, and I started to realize that when I struggle to have difficult conversations, is when I've tipped into more emotional connection with somebody.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and when I get emotional, not sure if it's happening at the minute, whether I've now got my red chest already. Yes, already there. So there's always a telltale sign with me when I care about something or, so I've got a telltale. So I already know that I've had to live with that as well. But so when I care, my vocabulary and being able to articulate mm, my thoughts with clarity, I struggle.
Mm.
I have struggled. Um, and this is historic. This is a historic thing. People can teach me in the world of work. You follow this process, you have this conversation. I was in sales. You teach people how to engage with people, have the conversation, features and benefits, how to overcome objections. Great. Absolutely. Process lovely in place. Then let's add emotion into there. Different ball game, absolute different ball game. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's being thrown at me. I haven't got a list of, well, if they say this, I can do this. I don't know how I'm going to react. And so for me, learning in my 40s why I reacted the way I would react and struggled beyond absolutely being honest, actually suddenly realized then I'm struggling to have difficult conversations, not because I don't want to have them,
Mm.
struggling with what to say. And I'm struggling that if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to get hurt
Mm.
and I'm potentially going to lose somebody. And the end result, by my language, could be the result I don't want.
Mm.
And then you get, I think, trapped in a bit of fear
Mm.
because, and it all circles back, doesn't it? So we're starting to feel vulnerable because if I say the wrong thing, I could lose somebody, something. This isn't going to work out. So you stop talking
Yeah.
because you don't want to make yourself vulnerable. And then have we stopped some trust there? And that's not the trust of the other person, that's us because we're questioning ourselves. And no, is it that we don't trust ourselves because of our own language? So we're starting to circle. Then we don't have the conversations. And then my classic would be I wouldn't have the conversation, and it'd all come out absolutely wrong anyway. Um, and then that's where we get into leadership and professionalism, because if we don't learn to have these difficult conversations as adults, we can cause damage to our colleagues and to the culture within our organization. And I think for me, that's where the thread started to really start to follow it of, okay, I'm learning how to be a leader. Well, initially, I'm learning how to be a manager. I'm managing a business. I'm managing a team. Then I'm trying to lead. And then suddenly I've got this. Well, why can't I make this bit work? Where am I?
Mm.
And this is the bit that I haven't learned.
Mm.
Um, and then I had to go off and explore different ways.
Mm.
So I think that's the thread for me on how, yes, we use the word trauma, things that have happened in our past that we're not confident in, that maybe there is a vulnerability, a trust, a confidence that then becomes a blocker, that then stops communication, that then gets misinterpreted and then becomes a bigger problem. And it feels that it's a really interesting part of leadership and being a leader.
And isn't that interesting? Firstly, I've seen you work through this and continue to work through this, and it's really interesting to see your take on what it is for you and how
Mm,
that presents, because I hear that and I think the confidence now in you to say that's how it comes out is that, not the fear of difficult conversations, but that maybe avoid, as you said, avoidance of them, and
yeah,
actually saying, okay, well, what's the impact if I don't have them now, and recognizing that that's your
yeah,
stretch into leadership, to say,
yeah,
actually, now I'm comfortable because not only am I running a business, but I care enough and I'm comfortable enough and trusting enough to know that I need these for wider benefit.
yeah,
So I think for me, mine presents in a similar way, but a different way too. And this is where it is again personal, is rather than having a lack of ability to have a difficult conversation about somebody else, I'm the opposite. I'm the same. There are conversations I avoid, but rather than being about other people, they're about me.
yes,
And that's where again, and for me it presents as an inability to explain, an inability to describe, an inability um to articulate, literally go empty. And you and I have talked about this for years, and you go, how are you? Like, I honestly, I don't know the words.
mm,
And as a leader, the impact that me then just working harder, me being more directive, me being more task-based, loses the warmth and the kindness and the empathy that we need to be good leaders.
Mm.
And again, that's misinterpreted because it's not coming from a place of not wanting to be kind or empathetic or understanding or supportive. It comes from an inability to articulate what's being presented, what's happening for me. And again, trauma, it's not trauma, it's just events.
Mm.
It's circumstance. And why do we call it trauma? Is it the right word? You could probably put in another word there rather than trauma. You could say situations.
I agree.
And
Difficult situations
difficult
and
situations.
scary situations that have impacted us.
Yeah. And how that's shaped my behaviours. And then how do I, as a leader, as a mum, as a business owner, as a family member, as a friend, how do I need to be aware of that because of the impact that has on other people? And I can tell you, Ruth, you're further along with your learning and your development than I am because I'm still
No.
just like.
No, I don't know. All the gear, no idea. I think it's classic.
I've got no idea and no gear and no idea.
Classic with me. Absolute classic with me. No, I recognize exactly the same. And we all, when we know how we all work under pressure, we know, and that's one of the biggest things that we start with, don't we anyway, before we even get into any of this with when we're working with professionals is start to understand yourself first. Because when you understand yourself, when you understand what happens to you under pressure, what happens to you when you're tired, what happens to you when you've got lots of things going off, when you understand that, you can start to catch it. Probably before other people recognize it. And that's the trick, because the reality is this isn't going away. All of this stuff of, we're talking about, we feel vulnerable, we feel this is what happens. That's never going away. We can't change, but what we can do is modify and learn and catch things a little bit earlier. Or even if we've not caught them earlier, when they have happened, know then how to rectify them. And because we're not perfect, and nobody's perfect in this world, and challenges are going to happen, arguments are going to happen, disagreements are going to happen. I really do think it is that whole thing of coming back and learning, understanding you to then be able to help yourself and then help other people. So when we talk about working in organizations, and what you would see is who's the right person in that organization that would be the person that would recognize these things. And when you're building teams, what's the characteristics within those teams, and understanding how they are wired and how we communicate with them in the right way, because everybody's different. That's why it makes it so fascinating, and that's what makes businesses so brilliant, because of the diversity and how everybody thinks. But when everybody's potentially in a pressurized situation on a project or a delivery, or something's happening and they've got personal things going off at home as well, this is where it fundamentally then comes back to when teams start to break under pressure. So yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a few things on that. So I hear that, and on the loudest thing that comes through is we can, as you're building these teams, and we think, okay, well, there's presumption. You go, right, well, they're a teenager, that this will be going on for them, or they've got a young family, this will be going on for them. We miss previous. My behaviour doesn't come from what's happened today. It comes from a lifetime.
Yes.
And that's what I bring with me. You are getting me and all my experience and all my journeys and all those times I've been knocked. And that's why, all were encouraged and you get me today.
Mm.
And I think the other thing is really a big turning point for me to remember. And again, this is your world, is doing your discs as you're building a team and you're profiling and looking at that. And do you remember when I did it after I haven't done one for a long time, and you and I were building a program together, and it was like, right, actually, I'll do one because again, I want an updated understanding and a feeling of going through this process. Do you remember? And I did it at the end of a really busy week. And when you said to give me my report, the first thing you said to me is, how are you getting on with Ant at the moment? Ant's my husband, everybody. And I went, well, yeah, we're fine. We're sort of, we're good, but we're just busy. And you were like, should we talk about this? Because you could see in me, and you know me well enough to say, I can see you're under pressure. And I can see that you might be suffering, you might be feeling vulnerable, but rather than sharing that vulnerability, the barriers go up and the task list gets bigger.
Mm.
And for me, that has had the biggest impact of changing, and not changing, that's not the right word, of creating awareness to a behaviour.
Mm.
I had a really interesting conversation with somebody recently who said that him and his wife, she comes from a family, broken home, not a happy childhood, carrying all of this, and feels, eldest sibling, feels a sense of leadership, feels a sense of duty and responsibility, but fearful of difficult conversations because of seeing the impact that that's had in the past. So now, as a couple, doesn't want to fight, doesn't want to dispute because of that fear, which means that things are not resolved. So they're discussed, but they're not resolved. You then take that into a work situation, and I see this, things are discussed, they're not resolved.
Mm.
Off the back of that. And that needs to be talked through, that needs to be worked out. And it's easier, isn't it, in a home setting, in a relational setting, because you have the time and the care, but in a work setting, that's tricky.
Yes, because how do you create the time? And as much as we do all spend X amount of time at work together, we're working, and the relationship part of things and that part is sometimes is it a byproduct, that what you're there to do a job of work. First and foremost, unless you're in a very specific role, that job of work is not developing teams all of the time. That's just a part of it. It's how we get that part right. I think when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, but fundamentally, I didn't want it to be this. We didn't want it to be this big thing about sounding such a big thing about trauma impacting professionals. And even saying it, and why does that make me feel uncomfortable? I don't know, but that's a different. And I think I got to the point of one, it was about being vulnerable. So if you've got people within your team that you can pick up that they have had bad experiences before, nip those things in the bud. So experience that I had with somebody joining our business was, first of all, they really didn't like one-to-ones and what you could formally call one-to-ones, KPIs, performance reviews. The language around that just sent them into a negative place. So they were starting the position with me of, what have I done wrong?
There you go.
You have to reposition all of that. So we took the word KPIs out. We talked about what we were aiming to achieve, and that it was to sit down and review what's gone well, leading with that, what's gone well, and what we want to learn going forward. So just changing that language.
Yeah.
Now that person has no worry of coming in and having a conversation with me. And as a leader, that's our responsibility to understand what somebody else's previous experiences have been, because they've had a very negative experience.
Mm.
Um, and the other thing, so there's a vulnerability there. It's up to us to be able to try and pick up where that vulnerability was. And you can see it in body language. You can
Mm.
see it on how somebody prepares for a meeting, how they come in, what their language is.
Mm.
So picking up on those and being able to have that conversation and then modify.
Mm.
We're still, the reality is we're sitting there and we're still having a performance review every month and we're talking about KPIs. It's
Yeah.
just packaged in a different way. And for me, I don't have a problem with that because that
Yeah.
means that a team member is comfortable and they're delivering, which is great.
Yeah.
The other way it can sometimes present is that fear of of getting something wrong and in the workplace being told off.
Yeah.
Um, and it was very similar. So somebody had come into work really quite poorly, but very new into the job. And I said, "Why are you here?" "Well, I wanted you to know that I was ill."
Yes.
And I literally just sat on the corner of my desk and just went, "Okay, can we stop this now?"
Can you go home?
I said, and the first thing I said to them was, "I trust you. You,
Mm.
I trust you to
Yeah.
make this decision. You don't." I said, "I'm more annoyed that you've got in your car and driven because you're obviously very poorly.
Yeah.
But something has happened to that individual previously
Yeah.
that makes them feel they have to drive into work and prove they were ill.
Yeah.
That I trust, and that was my I trust you."
Yeah. Trust you.
So as a leader, that's where we need to be helping people
Yeah.
when you identify something's not quite right and help them to
But
move
isn't
forward.
that, when we ask, and people ask at interviews, what can we do to help you get the best out of this?
Yeah.
Is actually maybe also is, how do you like to be praised? When
Yeah.
things aren't going well, how do you like to have those conversations? And it's not because, and there'll be people who go, oh, we're being too soft, and people are paid to come into work and do their job. It's like, no, 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 no. We are paid as leaders to bring the best out of our teams. That's why we're in leadership roles, and that comes with responsibility.
Yeah.
I had it recently with one of the team, and it was something. There was something that just wasn't. There was a fragility in someone, a vulnerability, an insecurity that was coming out in a way that was quite prickly and a bit defensive. And it just was rooted from a way of feeling that they were never good enough. From an overachieving, high achieving family where they didn't feel that they'd had a huge amount of praise and they were worried and fearful that it was never good enough. And as soon as you got to that point, everybody now goes, oh, that's fantastic. Starts with that. That looks brilliant. And that reassurance and that, and when it's not, it's like, oh, right, that's good. Shall we look at how, is there another way? Is there other stuff we could do to make it even better? Again, as you're saying, it's that language change, that's awareness. But it does come from being willing to be vulnerable. And for those of us who don't find vulnerability very easy, it shows actually that if we do that, it makes it easier for those around us to support us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As leaders and as people going through that. Ruth, I'm conscious that you and I could sit and talk all day about this. This is an insight. I think it would be interesting to come back and do more of these and do more of actually what are the elements of what are the reoccurring themes that we notice, and maybe we'll address those more specifically. Because I think the one I've heard from you today is that difficult conversations. And I think for me, again, that was one.
Yeah.
Difficult conversation, personal difficult conversations rather than difficult conversations about others. But there'll be other issues that are reoccurring themes, and maybe we ought to talk through them a little bit more and talk through techniques and things where we've seen that, or not, maybe just discuss them.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring them to the table. But as always, it's so nice to get together and talk through stuff. And actually, to share a conversation publicly that you and I have had for years.
Yeah. In the safe space that nobody's also in the room with us.
Nobody's here.
And then you can just put it out online.
And say to people, we're with you,
What do you
we
think?
stand with you. Yeah, exactly. What do you think? And they'll say,
What do you think?